Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, the primary election has concluded, and while some results remain undetermined due to the necessarily slow and careful counting of ballots, we'll bring you what can be known and draw some early conclusions. Also, City Manager Miles Slattery of Eureka joins us to discuss his work, city finances, and how it feels as the face of city governments at a time when trust in government is at an all-time low. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. There has been a rendering of the public trust. We just had an election. Thousands of Humboldt County residents engaged in the political process, did their best to understand the issues and candidates, then voted for what they believed the best options to be. Those that clearly won the night celebrated in this or that downtown bistro over drinks and under a barrage of high fives and attaboys. Democracy works, right? They're the living proof. Those that lost, their sadness, maybe even a temporary kind of denial, as they search under every rock and between every sofa cushion for those missing few votes that may make all the difference. This is normal, even necessary, for the determination of leadership. Everyone vying for a vote believes they have an answer to what ails us. It's natural to pursue your particular vision, especially if you believe in it. This is what democracy looks like. But this week also brought about another political development, one that to me strains belief and leaves a bitter taste in my big mouth. One of the two primary political parties has again chosen a man for its presidential candidate who showed little or no regard for the political process and blatantly instigated a coup that paralyzed our democracy and almost brought the entire system to its knees. I won't say his name, not today. So as we sift through this election's rubble, identifying trends and tallying votes, it's absolutely vital to remember that depending on who wins the upcoming presidential election, much or even all of this great and potent American political process could well be in jeopardy. How will we respond? What will we choose? How much does this democracy mean to us? Such questions will absolutely determine whether our generation is the one that squanders this democratic legacy. We'll be joined momentarily by Eureka City Manager Miles Slattery to discuss city business and his role as the city's chief executive. But first, the news. The 2024 primary election is now over. So what did we learn? Let's start with the race for 3 seats on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. Put simply, the incumbents ruled the night. 3rd District Supervisor Mike Wilson was re-elected to his seat on the board with 80.88% of the vote. 1st District Supervisor Rex Bone won his 4th term in office with 64.39% of the vote, while 2nd District Supervisor Michelle Bushnell was re-elected with 58.18% of the vote. As for the controversial Measure A, which would have put new and expanded limits on an already struggling cannabis industry, 73.36% of voters rejected that idea. April Van Dyke appears to have won a seat on the Humboldt County Superior Court bench, although given the way some late-breaking votes landed, there is a small possibility that Judge Gregory Kreis could overtake her total. Not likely, but possible. As for State Assembly, 2 Democrats are neck and neck for their party's nomination. Rusty Hicks, chairman of the California Democratic Party and Arcata resident, the one who sent out all the mailers and had all the YouTube ads, received 19.2% compared to Santa Rosa City Councilman Chris Rogers' 20.1%. The winner between these two will go on to face Republican Michael Greer, who received 27.4% in November. Finally, for U.S. Senate, it looks as though Congressman Adam Schiff has beat out competitors statewide with 33.3% of the vote. He will face Republican Steve Garvey in November, who received 33.3%. These results were released following Tuesday night's election and were current as of our deadline. They'll be updated over the next few weeks, and we'll have updates next week. You can also visit humboldtgov.org for the most updated tallies. Joining us now in studio is Eureka City Manager Miles Slattery. Thanks for joining us, Miles.
Thank you for having me, James.
So I want to make clear, at the beginning of the show, I was talking about federal government, not city government. Everyone holds city government in high esteem, right?
Of course.
Everyone.
Everyone.
So thank you for coming down to the studio. I know that you're probably one of the most busy people in Humboldt County. You've got a big job, so I appreciate you taking the time out and answering our questions. Let's start with a little bit about, just so people get an idea, the structure of city government. You are the chief executive. Can you sort of discuss how business unfolds and how laws get made, that sort of thing, within City Hall?
Yeah, so we're a city manager council form of government. We have 5 elected officials that serve as council members. They're basically our governing board. And then we have a mayor. The mayor is not a part of the voting process or setting policy. They can break ties. That mayor can break ties or things like that, but technically isn't a part of the voting process. So basically my job is to implement policies that are drafted and approved by the city council. So it's unique when compared to a county form of government. Like our county, you have 5 supervisors. Each one of those supervisors can direct their department heads, which there's a lot of.
So they each have individual authority over things.
Yeah, and they still set policy via vote and have 3% of that, but there's actually a superior, basically boss, employee relationship between them as well. For me, I just need to count to 3. When I count to 3 and a certain thing is approved or agreed upon, then we go out and put the appropriate staff in place in order to implement those policies.
So you're basically like the mechanism by which the votes of the city council go into effect.
Yes.
The city government.
Yeah.
Now
So we do that through creating programming. We do that through drafting ordinances, resolutions, other types of things like that get put into place to implement those policies.
Yeah. Now you've had a long career at the city. Could you talk a little bit about what you were doing before you became city manager?
I started in 2006. I was brought up here when stormwater regulations first started, which are basically regulations that put in water quality standards for runoff. And so back in 2006, they had just adopted their MS4, which is a municipal sewer sanitary. Anyways, basically the regulations that are associated with stormwater. And so I started that, developed a program, implemented it, and then moved into more kind of project management stuff with, running bids for construction projects, started getting into the trails. After that, I was promoted to Deputy Public Works Director, which was a huge department back then, and then eventually was promoted. They did some reorganization, took out some of the divisions within Public Works and created a Parks and Rec department. I became the department head for that. That evolved into community services when we started getting into social services programming. And then in 2020, in July, I became interim city manager and full-time city manager in December of 2020. So it's, believe it or not, 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So for now.
Were you ever, did you come to the job trying to get there, or did it kind of land in your lap to be city manager? In other words, was it always your aspiration?
I obviously wanted to, never, no. Like when I was in college, I wanted to raise fish. I was into mariculture. I had a degree in marine biology, and so that was my focus. I was going to go to graduate school, decided against going to graduate school, ended up in San Diego, actually became a chemist down in San Diego for about 8 years working for their environmental monitoring, and that's how I came up here. They had a big coup with their city attorney suing their union back then, and basically they froze wages for almost 20 years down there. And so right at the beginning of that, I said, okay, it's time. My wife was pregnant. Cost of childcare down there was ridiculous. It was one of us work, one of us don't work in order to take care of the kids. So we moved up here in 2006.
Wow. Now, so
back up here because I went to college here back in.
Oh, so you've already been up here at Humboldt? Or?
Yeah, I graduated in '94, and I stayed a few years after that. So I was here for about 8 years, from late '80s, '89 until about '97.
Okay. So you were actually only gone for 8 years, and then you came back.
Yeah. Yep. I worked at the Seagirl. I was a chowder boy at the Seagirl, and then Dave Grinzel, R.I.P., good buddy of mine, a big mentor of mine, ran the liquor still on Giantoli, and I was the manager/employee for my whole college career.
Oh, right on, man. So now, one of the things we're hearing a lot about is that the state is having a hard time with money. The county government's had an issue with their budget deficit. Can you give us a short summary of where you think the city government is at in terms of its finances, and then we can talk a little bit about how the city funds itself. In a broader sense.
So we've done really well thanks to our community. We passed a tax measure called Measure H. Yes. Did some polling on that, made sure that funding is going to where it's supposed to go. It's a general tax. The number one priority through that surveying was our roads, believe it or not. And so a good portion of that tax, approximately $3.5 million a year, has been going to roads. So we've been doing more road work than we have in at least the 18 years that I've been here. Probably more like 50 years since we've done this amount of road work. So we're allocating that on an annual basis to make sure. It's been extremely helpful with our public safety, being able to maintain staffing levels and provide adequate COLAs for not only our public safety, but for all of our staff. It's done really well with infrastructure. We've done a lot of park improvements that have been neglected for a very long time. My favorite is Highland Park. When I first came here, that park itself was, that neighborhood around there has the highest population percentage-wise of our K through 6 kids. Mm-hmm. And that park hadn't been touched 50 years. I don't know. It's been seriously neglected. The tennis courts were unusable for many, many years. We first started off the project with our local Rotary, Southwest Rotaries, with the help of Mercer Frazier and Hamanaka Painting, to redo the basketball court. Made a big difference. Got a lot more appropriate uses there and more use, deterring those inappropriate uses. And then just recently, because of this money, we've been able to, we're in the process. Hooven is working on a bid that they had won. They tore down the restroom, which hasn't been usable for years because it's not ADA compliant. That's torn down. We're putting in a new concession stand, new restroom, new drinking fountains, fixing all the trails through there, redoing the whole tennis court. And so that funding has been vital for us. And also we've had our finance director, Lane Millar, extremely competent and very much forward-thinking, has made it possible for us to build up reserves. We have investments with reserves. We're going through negotiations right now, and I'm happy to say that we have a tentative agreement with our EPOA, with our Police Officers Association.
Wow.
And so these funds have allowed for that, and I'd say that what we've come up with and what is tentatively, it's going to our council on the 19th for approval, but I can't speak specifics, but I am confident that some of the issues we've had with recruitment and retention, with, you know, not necessarily morale, but it's been tough. They've had to work ridiculous mandatory overtime, and it's been very difficult for them. And so I'm happy to say that what we've come up with is going to address a lot of those issues.
And this relates to the public announcement a few weeks ago where they were sort of asking for people to understand the crunch that they're under, and then now this seems like it might be an answer to it. So
yeah, I mean, we can't get it's, you know, it's up throughout the nation, you know, everything since George Floyd, it's been an issue. I can tell you we've come out of that very well. I think that I'm really proud of our police force and what we've done as far as transparency, getting through some of the issues that we had previously, and the folks that we have now are great people, and they've been extremely dedicated. I mean, they've been working mandatory overtime, you know, not just our sworn officers, but the whole department. And I'll say that for all of our departments, but obviously because of, you know, the political climate on policing right now, I think it just compounds the issue, but I think that this is going to be a huge difference.
Yeah. I'm interested in sort of a personal question, I guess. You came from a science background, and then as a sort of an operator or project manager, and then now you're the boss of police. Was that
I can tell you my buddies in high school are laughing.
Well, that's my question. How did that feel? Do you feel like, I mean, obviously there's no training that you undergo for that,
It was
right?
difficult. So it was odd. When I first became, and I think there was a lot of hesitancy, especially in public safety. I worked in community services. When we had financial issues starting in 2007, right after I had gotten here, we were cutting all of our non-public safety to the tune 10, 15%. You know, every other year we were cutting it, and we were protecting public safety because that was the priority of our council at the time. And so there was a competitive thing to me for me to support my people. And it took me a while to let them realize that, look, when I get into this position, you are my people, and I'm going to treat you the same way that I treated my people when I was in community services. And developing that trust was not easy, but I think we definitely have. I think that when I appointed previous Captain Stevens, previous Assistant Chief Stevens, to the now Chief position, you know, I really wanted to do that when we had lost our previous chief instead of having an interim, but in my opinion, I don't think I had built that trust with him, and I don't think that he could have done as well. Yeah. And so after that period with Chief Jarvis here, which was a great transition, I think he learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from Chief Jarvis. It felt really good to have Chief Stevens put in place, and I think that he's got a better opportunity to succeed because of that trust.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we never really think about the mechanics of the relationships of, managing a city or whatever. It's like as you come in, you have a certain amount of authority, but then you also don't want to squander any goodwill you might have by making too many rash decisions early, or, I mean, not that that was a rash decision, but you see what I'm saying? Like, it's a management thing, and you've got resources, and that's an interesting angle that I don't think a lot know.
I can tell you, can't really tell, but in high school, this would be the last place you would think I would be. I can assure you that.
I have similar stories. Now, one of the things I wanted to try to get a beat on a little bit is that there's been this ongoing housing issue. It involves a lawsuit. There's properties that have been talked about for development, the parking lots that are down in Old Town, and also the old Zoe Barnum. Could you just try and simplify that for folks? I know it's hard.
That's difficult. I mean, we have a housing element. We've talked about this, and I'm sure people are aware of it. So we have a housing element.
Part of the general plan.
It's part of our general plan. It basically, the state has to approve it. We went through a very long process. We tried a lot of different alternatives in order to avoid having to give up city property, but because of their emphasis on affordable housing and where we're at with the status, we ended up doing that. We tried to initially do it through, and to meet the affordable criteria, we tried to do it through accessory dwelling units, and saying that we have 6,000, 7,000 parcels. Of those parcels, each one could potentially have an ADU, so we changed our zoning regulations to allow for those ADUs without setbacks, so you can put more of them on there, all of those things. That didn't fly with HCD. We had some people actually file, I wouldn't call it appeal, but basically letters stating that it's not adequate, and so that's how we ended up assigning the city-owned parking lots. When we first started it, the first round of the request for proposals went with not much of a hitch. There were some people that were concerned about losing parking, but it didn't reach the level of mainly because the properties were 8th and G, 6th and M, and Sunny and Myrtle, and those aren't necessarily in Hilltown. So the next round of RFPs were coming out were going to be 5th and H, 4th and G, and 2nd and E, and that really raises people's eyebrows, even though there was a very long public process going through this housing element, a lot of public meetings, a lot of public input. But when it happens, that's when people come out. So everybody came out. We held an individual meeting for each one of those properties. Had at least 75 people in attendance. It was very clear that those that were there were very concerned about the parking, and so we stopped our process, got in a lot of trouble with the state, but
good on you.
I decided to stop the process, go out and say, hey, everybody, you want to trade properties? Let's do it. I negotiated with multiple businesses to discuss that, and many of the properties were available for trade. For one reason or another, a couple of those businesses chose not to follow through. We did end up following through with Pearson Development, and they had an agreement with Redwood Capital. So we made an exchange. We exchanged 5th and H, 4th and G, and what ended up being 5th and K, the parking lot adjacent to City Hall, and we traded that for properties that Pearson owned in between Harris and Henderson on Fairfield. So then we had to go back and really stop. I had to go through a 6-month-long process to update our housing element and everything. So here we are again after that, and we went out through an RFP, and that raised issues with folks, and there's a group formed called Citizens for a Better Eureka. It developed a bunch of lawsuits against the city. It developed a ballot initiative. The lawsuits, initially, there's 5 of them that are related to CEQA. 4 of them related to CEQA. 3 of them are based on individual properties. Oh no, there's 5. 4 are based on individual properties. 1's based on the update to our housing element. They initially didn't go for a preliminary injunction, which is basically, you guys can't move forward with your housing element until this gets squared away. Well, that went to court. We filed everything. They filed responses to our everything, and then they pulled it at the last minute and said that they didn't want to waste the judge's time, which was already through the process. But anyway, that didn't happen. So, but those lawsuits still exist. There's still going to be a hearing. Right now, the WIOT, who won one of the RFPs for the properties, the 5th and D, they're going to court against the Citizens for a Better Eureka for their lawsuit related to 5th and D. and filing a motion to dismiss. And so we'll see what happens there. And then,
I mean, for people at home, why doesn't the city just have the authority to make these decisions?
well, we do.
Yeah, but this is just part of the process that people have the right to.
Yeah, it's no different. I mean, and it's both sides do it. I mean, the same thing happened when the balloon track was happening, and people didn't like, what was going on there, the direction that was going there, so they filed lawsuits and complaints and violations of CEQA type of stuff. So it happens to both ends. It's understandable, and I understand both sides of the story, and I understand the concerns. We've done our best to mitigate. We, have every intention through the process that we have with the three properties from the first RFP. We got a $50 million grant. 10 million of those dollars are going towards transportation. Yeah. There'll be a micro transit bus that will take people around, and we plan on doing the same thing, is getting this transportation grants. A lot of the concerns about Own Town, in my opinion, would be alleviated because we have a lot of parking lots that don't have a high use. Yeah. And while people may have to park a little farther away, we'd have a shuttle bus that go around and get folks to where they need to go, rain, shine, handicap, non-handicap. So we're looking at a parking structure as well for some grant funding for that. So we understand the concerns, and we're just trying to make it, what
trying to
concerns me.
Insoluble problems. Almost.
Yeah, what concerns me is there's a thought out there that somehow affordable housing is going to cause more crime, and it's just not true. These folks are employed folks. They make anywhere very low income, single person, 25 grand a year. These are the people that make your bagels, people that do those things that, and that's one of the biggest complaints that we hear from businesses, is that it's very hard for them with the wages that they pay for the people to find housing here locally because the rents are so high. So what's really good about it is not only are these people working, I mean, if you have a family of 4 and you're low income, you can make 80 grand a year. That's not, in my opinion, low income. Yeah. These are working families that are at a level where they need support, and what's great about that is they can't charge more than 30% of that they earn. So that frees up 2/3 of their salary, basically, for other uses. Yeah.
And I think that truly gets at the heart of what people are struggling with in this area is low wage jobs and no affordable housing opportunities in terms of inventory. And but how realistic are these? Like, you talk about the housing element and the goals that are set forth in there. Can we realistically make a difference in the price of housing by supplying more units? I've never 100%. Seen the market react in a way positively. So
I think we can. It's not just, the housing element, and I need to make that very clear. People think it's all about affordable. We have a responsibility for 900 units. 300 of those are affordable. Okay. The other 600 are market rate and above market rate. Okay. And I think that needs to be really emphasized, because it's not just about the affordable, because those will get priced out as well. You need all levels. Yeah. So that's why we've changed our zoning regulations to allow for that.
Right? People will move up, and then that'll free some things.
So that whole, spectrum of housing needs to happen, and it's, everybody keeps saying the housing, and they associate it with, and what really pisses me off, to be honest with you, is that, when we hear affordable, they think it's like transitional or permanent supportive housing, or housing of which you're taking people that are unsheltered and putting them direct. Not the case at all. Yeah. A small portion of this will be voucher housing in Section 8, but typically it's only about a quarter of the number of units. So if we took a quarter of all of the 300 units, you're looking at less than 100. So only a portion of those will be Section 8, but none of it will be transitional housing, won't be a shelter, it's not going to be permanent supportive housing, it's affordable housing. And where I come from, and people give me grief about this because I'm not a local, even though I've spent more than 30 years of my life in this area, but San Diego, my mom lives in a very affluent area, Del Mar. They, same type of thing, CEQA lawsuits for the same type of thing. 300 units literally right across the street from her. It's been in place for about 5 to 7 years now. Same concerns about, you're bringing crime, you're doing these things, you're low on my property, all XYZ. Just last year, one of the most affluent, Wolfgang Puck, all these nice restaurants right next door, strip mall, just got built. So it doesn't deter, it actually increases safety. That's a lot. I walk everywhere, and and I like to go out and have a good time, and so I walk at night, and whether it's, you know, if it's not Friday night markets or it's live, something like that, after 10, it's desolate.
Yeah.
If you have these people down there after 10 and they live there, it's not going to be desolate. And
Yeah,
that
and
safety
people will be
factor
more
will be
reluctant to
huge.
commit crimes because there's witnesses everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, and it just adds a level of settledness and you know, stability to a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is closely related to the homeless issue, and the last thing I guess I want to ask you about, we got about 2.5 minutes left, is that Proposition 1 is sort of in the ether right now. We're not sure which way it's going to fall. Could you explain to us why the city of Eureka is in support of Proposition 1 and what it would do for you?
We haven't taken official stance
Well,
as far
you
as a
are, I
council,
guess.
but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can say that from a staff standpoint, it's critical. When we first started there, when they started this homeless funding, the first program was called No Place Like Home. McGuire was a big proponent of that. He held a workshop down in Ukiah. We went down there. This is when we first started, because we were on the cutting edge and still are of a municipality that provides social services. We started it through basically fundraisers at bars, and that's how we funded this program. And then eventually we've gotten to the point where we've gotten millions of dollars of grant funding. Great partnership with the county. The county has supplied us a significant amount of funds, not only for staffing, but also for housing support and getting people housed. But when we first went down there, our biggest gripe, and I think most municipalities, cities bear the brunt of the liability. When you look at the ACLU lawsuits, the other lawsuits related to, you know, rights of community members experiencing homelessness, those lawsuits come against the municipalities. There's very few. I'm not aware of any county that has been sued, maybe LA County, for those types of, we've been sued.
Yeah.
San Jose, San Francisco, everybody that's in municipal level. And what's unfortunate is the funding that is for these types of services, not necessarily for community members experiencing homes, but for disadvantaged community members, that typically goes to counties.
Yeah.
And there's no state or federal money that comes directly to the municipality. Now, we have a good relationship with DHHS and the county, and we apply for those funds, but my big argument to McGuire back then was, you need to make this available to these, because these are the entities that are taking on the liability associated with this. Didn't happen. That's what's great about Prop 1, is that it'll be available to municipalities. It'll be able to, you know, nonprofits, those type of things. It's not going directly to, and it should mix up how things work, you know. I don't think that I'm necessarily this county, but there's a lot of counties out there where it's very clear that the way it's been working is not making improvements, and so.
We're out of time. That was a big discussion in a little amount of time, so thank you very much.
Yes, it was.
We
Thank
crammed
you.
a lot in.
All right.
All right, thank you very much,
Appreciate
and
it.
we'll see you guys again next week. Stay tuned, stay informed.